The storm was merciless that night, a rain slashing the city like broken glass, streets flooded, lights flickering in the distance. On a dim corner near the old Café Tilde Copyright, a young nurse named Maya stood under a weak street lamp, her uniform soaked, her eyes tired yet kind. She had just finished a double shift at the hospital, unaware that fate was about to change her life forever. Suddenly, the screech of tires ripped through the night. A black car spun out of control, crashing into a street pole right in front of her. Without a second thought, Maya ran toward the wreckage. Inside, a man was bleeding from his forehead, and a small boy sat in the backseat, crying uncontrollably. Maya forced the door open, pulling the unconscious man out before the smoke could consume him. She grabbed the child next, shielding him with her own body as the car burst into flames behind them. That night, she saved 2 lives: a terrified child, and his father, Ethan Cole, one of the most powerful CEOs in the city. A week later, Maya went back to her usual routine: a quiet, humble, invisible. She worked extra hours to pay for her brother's school and her mother's medical bills. She never thought she'd see the man she saved again. Until one morning, while serving coffee at the hospital cafeteria, she looked up and froze. Ethan stood there, a tall, handsome, wearing a crisp suit but with a bandage still on his forehead. His gray eyes softened the moment he saw her. "You're the nurse who saved me," he said quietly. "And my son, Leo." Maya smiled shyly, brushing it off. "Just doing my job." But Ethan didn't leave. He insisted on thanking her, offering money, a house, anything. She refused everything. All she wanted was for his son to heal. That humility, that strength, struck Ethan harder than the accident itself. Days turned into weeks, and somehow, their lives began to intertwine. Ethan would visit the hospital often, bringing little Leo, who adored Maya. The boy would run to her every time, hugging her legs, calling her angel. Ethan watched silently as his son laughed for the first time since his mother's death. One evening, when the hospital had quieted, Ethan found Maya in the cafeteria again. Her eyes were red. She had just received news that her mother's condition had worsened. Without asking, Ethan sat beside her. "You saved my family," he said softly. "Now let me help yours." But Maya shook her head. "I don't need saving, Mr. Cole. Just a broken bar, a little faith." That was the moment Ethan realized she wasn't weak. She was the strongest woman he had ever met. Months later, Ethan learned the truth. Maya had been fired unfairly for speaking up against a corrupt hospital administrator who stole patient funds. She didn't fight back, afraid of losing her mother's treatment plan. When Ethan found out, he was furious. He used his power and influence not to destroy, but to rebuild. He bought the hospital itself, not as a CEO, but as a man who wanted justice for the woman who once risked her life for his. The next morning, Maya was called back to the hospital. She thought it was to collect her remaining pay. Instead, she walked into the lobby and froze. There stood Ethan, surrounded by reporters and staff. He turned toward her and smiled. "Meet the new head of patient care," he announced, his voice steady and proud. "The woman who reminded me that power means nothing without compassion." Maya's eyes filled with tears as applause erupted around her. Ethan walked closer and whispered, "You saved me once, Maya. Now it's my turn to protect you." Over time, their bond grew into something neither expected. Ethan, the once closed-off CEO, found warmth in the simplest moments, sharing coffee with Maya, laughing with his son, walking through hospital halls not as a businessman but as a father and a friend. Maya, too, began to see beyond his title. She saw the man who stayed late to read bedtime stories to Leo, who helped patients anonymously, who carried guilt over a past he couldn't fix. One evening, standing on the hospital rooftop under a blanket of city lights, Ethan turned to her and said, "You showed me what real strength looks like. You taught me that healing isn't about money, it's about heart. Maya smiled faintly. And you taught me that kindness isn't weakness, it's power. They stood there in silence for a while, the wind carrying the faint sound of the city below, sirens, laughter, life. Ethan reached for her hand, his grip gentle but sure. A year later, the hospital had transformed. Patients received care regardless of their background. Staff were treated fairly. Maya became a symbol of hope, while Ethan became the man who rebuilt his empire on compassion, not profit. But the most touching moment came during Leo's school event. When the teacher asked the little boy who his hero was, he smiled and pointed to Maya. "She saved my daddy," he said proudly, "and she saved me too." Tears filled Maya's eyes as Ethan looked at her, that same look from the night he whispered those unforgettable words. "You saved me once," he said again, voice trembling with emotion. "Now, and always, it's my turn to protect you."